So in this video, we'll build a user management application with inline editing. So let's see the preview. So we need to build an application, display list of users with the ability to edit and save the information. So if you scroll, you can see this will look like application. We have user list and we are displaying list of users with option to edit. So when we click on edit, we can have option to inline edit that information. And we also need to display that information on page load. So we also need to store that information on local storage. So even if we refresh the page, we still have that information. So you can see here requirement, display user list heading. So you can go through this. So here in table format, each user will have following properties: ID, name, age, and location. Location is object with state and city property. So we'll have list of users, constants, users array, in which all these properties. So each object, each user will be an object. Now we need to display separate results. So we have already seen this. The UI does not matter. It's just for your reference. The functionality is important. So you can write this UI as whatever, however you want. So you can create this UI however you want. The functionality is important with inline editing. So by building this application, you will also learn how to store or update the nested object. So we have array of objects, and each object has a location property with city and state property. So you will learn how to update nested properties. So in different ways. So if you have a lot of nesting, then how to update that in an efficient way. So you will learn that also. So this challenge is really helpful to practice how to do data manipulation, array and object data manipulation. So let's start building this application. So I will create using Vite.js, npm create Vite, and I have already created folder. So I will just say dot, so it will create in the same folder. So it's saying that directory is not empty. That is fine. Ignore files and continue. Now I will select React and JavaScript. Now you can see the project is created and we don't have node modules folder. So let's first install all the packages. So I can say npm install. You can see we need to run npm install and then npm run dev. So it will create a node modules folder by reading all the packages dependency as well as dev depend. Both will be installed on the local machine. When you deploy your application, only dependencies will be installed. So now let's wait until this is done. Now that installation is complete and all the files are created. Now let me clear it out and I can run npm run. Now to start the application, you need to check in package.json which are the different scripts. So we have dev script, npm run dev. You can see this application is started. So this is the default application. Let's modify it. Here, let me delete type.css. I don't want. Here, let me create a boilerplate code. Index.css. I will remove this. I will remove this. I will add some default reset. Margin 0, padding 0, and the box size in border. So the application will look exactly same in all browsers. So we have this for our reference. Now app is displayed. So we need to display heading as users. So we will not be wasting time in writing CSS. So I will copy paste all the CSS code from here. So paste it here. So I will add all the CSS. So we don't have to waste time in writing CSS. So now first thing is we need to display this heading of user list. Let me declare h1 users list. So you can see user list is displayed. And let's also change the title from this Vite plus React. Here also I can say users. Now the title will also change. To display this list of users, first we need to create an array of objects with all of these properties. So here I will create a utils folder. Inside it, I can create constants dot check. So here I will create a constant users array, and it will have array of objects. So which are the different properties we need? ID, name, age. So ID one, name, let's say Mike, age. So we have age and location. So we are not displaying age, but we can create that in location. Location will have two properties, city and state. So let's declare city, New York, state, New York. So like this. So we'll have multiple objects. So I will copy, paste all the array. So instead of manually typing, I will directly add this array. So I have created this array and I have renamed it to initial users instead of users. And I have added all these list of users. So now we just need to display these users. So inside the app component, let's create a new components folder where we can display them. So create users list.js. Create boilerplate code. So if you don't know how to create, you can install this ES7 plus snippets extension. This is really useful. So you don't have to type everything from scratch all the time. So once you install, you can just type RAFCE. So it will create functional component with export. Now let's pass this, use this users list here. And let's import the users. Import users from. So let's pass those users as a prop here. So I say users equal to users. So let's open the constant file initial users. And we are already exporting. So I can say initial users and import it from utils constant. So you can see this is named export. So we have exporting as name. So we are writing in curly bracket. Now we are passing this as the users, prop name is users. So we can take out the users prop here. And here we can display it. So let me name give class of users list. Here I can display span. Which different properties we need to display? We need to display name, city, and state. So we need to use. Now here we can loop over that users array and display. So I will use users dot map method for individual user. I will return, let's say span user dot name. So let's check its name. Then we don't want age. We now want city and state. Let's create the state. So here we'll add a div. Last name equal to user role. Will be formatted nicely. So you can see now all the names are displayed. You can see the city and state are not displayed because we are directly accessing city and state from user. But it's property of location. So we need to use location.city and location.state. So here let's add location.city and location.state. Now if you check, you can see we get this list of users with all their cities. Now we can also add a button here. So let's add a button here and I can say edit. Now you can see we have this edit button. So all the CSS are already written in index.css. So you can see user list, user row, and we have button CSS also. So that's why the styling is automatically applied. So now when I click on edit, I want to display input field instead of these text. And we also need to identify which edit button we have clicked. So let's first declare state to store that input fields. So let's first display input field on click of edit. So let's go here and on click of this, first we need to identify which edit is clicked. So I can say handle edit. We can pass the ID. So each user, if you see constant, has a unique ID. So make sure you have that unique ID. and we need to pass that ID here. So we can identify which edit button is clicked or which user we are trying to edit. So I can print that ID and we can see if it gets listed. We can see we have some warnings. So always keep this console open so we can identify if there is any error. So we need to add a key here, user.id. So key is very important, never forget that. So whenever using array map method, you need to add a key to the parent element. So using that React identifies which elements of the UI are changed. Now when I click on this edit, you can see we are getting error, ID is not defined. Let's see where we are getting under edit ID. So this should be user.id. Now let's refresh and click on edit. You can see you correctly get ID 2. Let me zoom in. Now when I click on first, you get 1. If I click on third, let's click on the last one, you get ID 10. So we are correctly getting the ID. Now by identifying that ID, we need to display input fields here. So here we can add a condition. Let's store this ID somewhere. So we'll declare state. So default value will be -1. So ID will not be -1 for any of the user. So we are assigning -1. Now let's declare user ID, set user ID, edited user ID. We can say edited user ID, which is more clear. Set edited. Now we can set this set edited user ID to ID. So we don't need to console this. Now we can identify if it's really getting changed by opening the dev tools, React dev tools, click on user list. And if I click on edit, you can see state information is updated. So these are props and this is a state. So I correctly get the information. If I click on the last one, you can see you correctly get this ID. So state is getting updated. Now here we need to conditionally display this part. So let's keep this. Let's just change this. So here we can add a condition. If edited user ID is equal to user.id. So the currently user which we are looping over, if it's exactly same, then we need to display input fields here. Otherwise, we need to display these spans. So as these are side by side, we need a parent container. Let's add that React fragment syntax. And here we need to add, let's add div. We can see this is now displaying properly. So we don't have any error here. So by default, this edited ID is -1. So when it comes, user ID is -1. -1 is not equal to any of the user ID. So all the IDs starts with 1. So that's why we don't see initially this part. We always see this part. Now when we click on edit, we are setting that ID. So here we need to display those input fields. Let me delete this, and here I can add input field. Input type equal to text. You can give some name, let's say username, or you can give the exact same name, property name, so it's easy to update. So I can say name. Let me add another city and one for state. So now we'll see this. So let's click on edit. You can see now we see this. We also want a save button here. So once we click on this, we need a save button. So let's make this form so we can submit that form. And here we can add a button. Save. So you can see now we see this saved. But this form, to submit this form, this button need to be of type submit. So let's add that. Now we need to track what user is typing here. And we also need to initially set the user. So when I click on edit, whatever value, the current value we have, we need to display that in that input field. So here we need to store the user ID. We are already storing the user ID here. So here, let's declare another state. We can say current user, state current user called use state. So now we have three things we need to track: name, city, and state. Let's declare an object with those three properties. So initially, all of these will be empty. State will be empty. Now here as a value, we can display this. So current user dot name, and let me copy paste here. This will be city, and this will be state. So if I change this to mic, you will see mic displayed. You can see mic is displayed. Click on here, you can see mic is. If I add here city, New York, and click on edit, you can see New York is displayed. So we are correctly displaying that input field value. Now we need an on change handler. So when you give value prop, you have to add on change. So if I refresh and click on edit, you can see there is a warning. So you provided a value prop to a form field without on change handler. So this value prop is optional. You don't have to give that. But if you give that, then you have to use on change handler. So let's add on change handler. I can say handle input change. So this is on change handler. So it will automatically receive event as the argument. I will use the same on change handler function for all of these inputs. All these three things are related to each other. We'll be updating them together. That's why it's good to have one single change handler. So based on the name which we are changing, we can identify which input field we are changing. So here I can destructure event.target. Here I can destructure name and value. And if I print this name and value, you can see what input field we are changing. So let's say I click on edit. Here, if I change mic, you can see I am typing there. So the input field is name and value is mic. Here, if I type London, you can see you get city and London is getting this. But we don't see that typed here. So whatever we are typing, we don't see that. Why it's happening? Because we have provided the value prop, and on change, inside on change, we need to update that exact same value prop. Then only that value will get displayed in the input field. So inside on change handler, we need to call the set state function, set current user, and we need to update that particular input field. So we can identify which input field we are using that name prop. So I can use the square bracket syntax and name. So this is the newer syntax. So if you have something dynamic key, then you can add that square bracket. If I just use name colon value, then it will always update that with the name property. So we can see it here. So user list. So we have this current user. You can see now if I try to update here hello, you can see now we have single object with name hello property. If I update here, let's say London, you can see we have this name property with value London. So we are always setting the name property and we are losing the previously updated value. So this is not correct. So what we need to do, we need to use the bracket syntax. So whatever input field we are adding, that will get updated. So now let me refresh this and we can change this. So now we have object with three properties. Now when I click on this and if I say mic, you can see now we have object with name mic. If I change here London, you can see you have now city with London prop. But now again we are losing that previous one. So whenever we are storing an object in the state and we are setting that object, this will completely replace that object. So but I don't want to remove or I want to keep that previous value. So what you need to do, you can spread out the current user. So whatever properties we have already added, they will remain as it is. So whenever I'm changing, typing in the name input field, so I will be updating the name property. When I type in the city input field, I will be updating city property. But all other properties will remain as it is. They will not be lost. So if I refresh now, you will see correct values updated. So let me edit the first one. Here I will say mic. You can see now other properties are not lost. So only name is updated. If I change here London, you can see city is changed to London, but name remains Mike. So we are correctly able to see that value in all these input fields. So if I say UK, you can see it correctly gets updated. So we are able to successfully able to see those values. Now we are getting those values, we are storing that information. Now we need to update this information. So when I click on save, I want to update that user record. So we have list of users here. So I want to find out which user I am trying to update, and I want to update that particular property. So whatever properties we have, name and location, city and state. So we need to update that. So if you see that users array is here, initial user. So let's create here users array. You can say set user equal to use state. Initially it will be empty. Now this users I will set here and I will pass initial users. So now it's exactly same. Now instead of directly passing initial user, I am passing that state. So now if I refresh and click on edit, you can see it still works. So we still get that way. But what is the advantage of now this? Now I can update this array. So I can create a function. I can say update user, and here I can receive. So I need to find out what are the updated values. So when I click on this, if I type my London, so these values I need to get that. So we can pass that as object here. So I can pass that as a updates. So it will be an object, and here I need to update. So once I click on that submit button, so once I click on this submit, we need to pass that function. So here let's add that on submit handler, and here I can say handle submit. So this will again be event, it will receive that event, and I can pass this here. And here I can print the value, current user value. I can print it here. Let me remove this function for now with that later. And if I refresh this, let me open console. When I click on this, if I say Mike, London, you can see it gets updated. And here, if I say UK, and if I click on save, you can see the page is getting refreshed because this is a form submission, which is the default action of form submission. So here we need to use event.prevent default. So default refresh action will be prevented and will not refresh the page. Let me clear this again. Go back to home page. Click on edit. I will say Mike, London, UK. Clear this and click on save. Now you can see you get an object with whatever properties we have typed. So whatever values we are typing, we correctly get that once we click on save. Now this subject we need to pass to that function, and that function will update that individual record of that user's array. So whatever value we are getting this current user, we need to pass that. So let me bring back that update user. I will pass it as a prop here and go to here. Let me call that function here. I will call this function and I will pass the current user, which is object. And we need to take this current user as a prop here, update user. And now let's add code. You can say updated user. And here we need to update. Now this set users, it should be users. Set users, we need to set that array so we can see that update. So here for setting, how we can update this. So if you see we have this array, let me show you again this component. So if you see this array, we have this array and we need to update that specific element, specific user. So we also need to find out which user to update. So we need to pass ID also for that updated user. So here from user list, we can pass the ID. So from where we'll get that ID? So we have that ID in the edited user ID. So I can pass that edited user ID. So this update user, now I will get that ID and updated user. Now I will use map method, users.map for individual user. I will check condition. If user.id is exactly matching with the ID that I am passing, so what I need to do, so if you see the individual user is the object. So in this object, I want to keep all other properties. So name, age, ID, I want to keep as it is. So I will spread out, I will return an object. Because this is object, you always need to return an object here. So I will spread out all the properties of user. So it will keep that ID, age, name property. And for location, I want to update the city and state. So I will manually add the location property. And in this, I will spread out again all the properties. So if you have some more properties here, let's say country also, you don't want to lose that. So for that, I will spread out user.location also. And I will update the city property. So city will come from updated user.city. And so if you see here, we have that information, what is coming. So we have name, state, and city. So we need to update the name property. So name will be updated user dot name. So here we are just spreading out. So whatever we have the previous values, age, ID, and name. So we spread out, but I need to update that name property with whatever user has entered. Now we also need state, updated user dot state. So this will update that particular record when there is a matching ID. But what about the other records where it's not matching? So I am only clicking on edit button for the first user. So it should update only the first user. If all other users will return that as it is. So here in the else, I can return user as it is. So if you want, you can also add else here and return that. But you don't need else here because if this condition is not satisfied, it will anyway come here. So I can remove it. So if it's true, then only this user will be updated. Otherwise, we return user. So this is a map method. So map method returns a new array. So you need to remember that it does not update the user's array. It will not mutate the user's array. Map method will return a new array and which we are setting to the set users function. So now set users will receive a new users array where we are just updating that particular entry. So now we can lock that users array here. So we can see that updated. Let me refresh this again. So initially you can see we have list of 10 users. Let me clear this. Now when I click on edit, we first need to pre-populate those values. So I don't know what was the previous value. So let's pre-populate these values first. So here we also need to pass that user which we are editing. So here, in addition to this, let's also pass the user. In handle edit, here you will receive ID and that user. Now I can directly set this current user and spread out all the properties. So if we see this user object, it has all other properties also. So age, ID, location, name. I don't want these values. I want only set these three values, name, city, and state. So I need to manually set that. So I will set a new object with name property whose value will come from user.name. So if you see, the name is a direct property of individual user. So I can show you here. So you can see each user has a name property. So I can directly. Now I want city property. So I need to use user.location.city. So I will set city property. So I am setting current user. So this user's object we are setting. So it has three properties. So I am setting those properties. User.location.city and state will be user.location.state. So on click of edit, we are setting the ID which we are editing as well as the user which we are editing. So now let's verify this. So let me refresh this. When I click on edit, you can see we are not losing those values now because we are setting that current user. And once we set the current user, component will re-render and you have the value. So I am using that current user.name, current user.city. So we are getting those values and I can say updated. I can enter that. So this value, once click on save, you can see now this is the value that we are sending. And in the update, if you see, you can see we are correctly updated that particular record. So from the users array, name is updated, city and state we have not updated. So let's update that also. Let me clear this. So Toronto, let me add one exclamation mark here. I will add two and I will click on save. So you can see we are correctly able to update that record. All other properties, other users are not updated. So this is important. So you need to remember that whenever updating, you need to return that user. So from math method, you always need to return something. If I don't return this user, what will happen? If there is a matching ID, that record will be updated, but all others will be undefined. So let me show you. When I click on edit, so right now I have all the users. But if I update here, update it and click on save, you can see we are getting error because now we have only one user with that updated information and all others are now undefined. So it's very important inside map, you always need to return. So if this is the matching condition, we are returning object. If there is no matching, we return that user as it is. So now we are successfully able to update this record and that updated we can see it here. Now once it's updated, we want to bring that back original text. We don't want to keep this input field as it is. So what we need to do? So how we are identifying whether to display input or that text? By this edited user ID. So if edited user ID matches, then we are displaying this form, otherwise displaying this input. So we need to reset this edited user ID back to -1 once we are done with save. So once we call this update user, after that we can call set edited user ID and set it to -1. Now what will happen once we set this, React will re-render this component and here it will again check that ID is equal to any of the user ID. It will never match because there is no user with -1 as the ID. So it will not go inside this form condition. So it will not display this form, it will display this input field. So it will display this static text. So let me refresh and we can try it. When I click on edit, you can see alive. You can say updated exclamation 1, 2, click on save. You can see now you correctly see that updated data. So we are successfully able to update this information. So I can update any user, not just first. Let's say I want to update the George. I can click on George. I can add one exclamation mark. And here, let's not update this Paris. Let's update this to just France. Click on save. Now you can see George exclamation mark here France and it's Paris. Click on save. You can see it's updated. But now if I refresh, you can see we are bringing back the original because we are not storing this information. So let's now, as per the challenge, if you see here, we need to store that data in the local storage, loading the data on page load and saving as the changes up. So now once we update and once we load this, we need to store that in the local storage. Let's do that. So here, when the update happens, when we call this update user function. So we can update that information in the local storage. So you cannot do here. So there it's very important. Let me show you here. So this is this particular function. And here you might think to store this here. So to store in the local storage, we need to use local storage dot set item. And here I can give some unique key. So I can say users. And here you need to store that users array. So I can say JSON's dot stringify and users. So always we need to use JSON dot stringify to store any data, whether it's a array, string, number, boolean, any value. Always use JSON dot stringify and call the set item. Now this will set this user array. But it's very important when you say set users, React will not update that user array immediately. You are just scheduling, telling React to update this. So on the next render, React will update that user array. So here you will not get that updated data immediately. So instead of adding this code inside here, you need to add that in use effect. So let's say add use effect. And don't forget to add empty bracket. So on the initial load of this particular array, we need to set this local storage with whatever users we have. So once the page is loaded, or first time when you refresh this page, we are storing that users array with and initializing with initial users. And now this use effect will run after the rendering happens, and it will store that information in the local store. So let me refresh this. And if I go to application now, you can see there is a users property. Let me zoom out. So we have users property and all the users are correctly stored in that particular local storage. So inside local storage, click on this current domain and you will see that info. Now, once I click on save, I need to update this local storage. So here we can add a dependency users. So whenever the users array changes, I want to again execute this code. If you don't add this, this will execute only once when the page is loaded. But on every change of users array, I want to update that. So I can add this here. And now, even if we save this, it will be automatically updated here. So let's try that. So let's say I want to update this pop. I will click on this. I will add one exclamation mark. Sydney, I will add double exclamation. And now you can see in the local storage also this Bob has correct Sydney news with whatever we previously did. Now if I click on save, you can see now Bob is correctly updated with the updated value. So we have Sydney double exclamation mark. There is no state change because we have not updated and Bob is changed. So we are successfully able to store that information in local storage. So because now we are reading from local storage, so initially we are reading, we are not reading from local storage on page load now. So if I refresh this, so right now we have changed it Bob values. But if I refresh, you can see we are bringing back to the original user file. So even though the users, you can see on the local storage also we have updated. So what we are doing on the page load, we are again reading from initial users constant array, which we don't want. So if there are users in the local storage, then we need to read that. So here I can read from local storage. You can say local users equal to json.parse and JSON. Here we can say local storage dot get item, and we need to use the exact same key name users. Now what we are doing on the page load, we are reading from local storage. If there are users available, then we'll use that as the initial value. So if there are users, then we'll set that. But what if users does not exist? So if I clear this local storage and refresh this, you can see there is blank. So our page is broken. So you can see cannot read properties of null reading map. So initially you don't have that local storage users array. So we get null as the value. And we are using map method here for displaying those users. So here you can see users.map. So we are getting the same error. Cannot read properties of null reading map in users list dot. Here we are getting error because map method we can only use on array. So here array, it's not array now. The users is null. So we cannot use map method. So what you need to do? Go back here. So if there are users in local storage, then we'll use this. Otherwise, we'll use that initial users. So we need to import this. Which is coming from the constant. So if I refresh now, you can see we don't have any error. So even if I clear this and refresh, we don't get any error. So what we are doing on page load, well, first we render all the content. At that time, users local storage, this will be null. And if it's null, this or will be executed and we are setting it to initial users, which is the data coming from this constant array. And now that you are setting here in the local storage. So use effect runs initially also. So even if we are passing this users array, this code will execute on page load also. And also when the users array change. So page load also setting this local storage. So even if I clear and refresh this page, we are getting those users. So now this is all working. So we are successfully able to edit, update. So you can see I can click on edit any user to edit, and I can update this Daisy. Let's say Daisy Jackson, and I will click on save. You can see this is update. But if I click on edit and don't update, if I click on others, let's say I updated this. But if I click on the different one, you can see we are bringing back the original. So we have not updated. So only when you click on save that gets updated. If you don't click on save, just update this and click on edit for others, you don't update, which is the correct behavior. So that's how the update operation works. Now we are done with the basic editing functionality. But if you see the code is becoming complex, so we are just updating name here and city and state. What if I want to update age property? So you will have more code added here. So let's say instead of editing inline, we have a model. So when we click on edit, we will be displaying model and we can update multiple properties. So if user has lot of properties and you want to update, so in that case, the code will get more complex. Let's say inside location, we have some extra property. So there is a random users API if you see. So each user has location, location has coordinates property. So if I want to update that coordinates property, so how can we update? So you need to add that coordinates property. Then again, you need to spread out user dot location dot coordinates. And then you need to update that latitude property with the whatever new property you have. So updated user dot latitude. So this is how you need to update. So this code is not easy to understand. It also gets complex as you have more nesting available. So let's see this how it works, and then we'll see a better way. So no matter how many nesting you have, you can easily update that without manually spreading out all the properties. So there is a better way instead of manually spreading out all the properties. So I will add a coordinates property inside this constants array, and then we'll see how to update. So now I have added coordinates property to each of the user objects. So let's display this input field for changing. Let's say just I want to change the latitude, not longitude. So let me add a one more input field. Here I can say for latitude will be empty initially, and it will come from latitude. So once we change, you don't need to make any changes here because we are using dynamic properties in there. So let's refresh, click on edit. Now you can see we have this another field which gets that information. So here we are not able to see that latitude user, current user dot latitude, because once we click on edit, we are not setting that. So let's set that latitude property user dot location dot coordinates. So coordinates dot latitude. Now, if we click on edit, you can see we have this latitude plot. Let's add some margin dot css, and here we can see where is the input. Here is the input. So I can add margin top bottom. Let's say 5 pixel. Let's say 10 pixel, and left right 0. Now you can see there is some gap. Let's add left right 5 pixel also. Then there is space. So once I click on this edit, I need to get that information. Why it's not coming now? And once we click on edit, we are getting this error and it's not pre-populated. So we are getting error cannot read latitude proper. Why we are getting? Because in the local storage, you can see we have the older information. So even if we have updated this constant array in local storage, we already have the different property. So let's clear this local storage and refresh. Now you can see in the local storage, we have this latitude. So if I click on edit, now you can see it correctly pre-populated already. So any of the input field, I can click on it correctly populate. So here, so now I want to update. So here inside the add component, inside this, we have coordinates property, which I want to update. And its value will come from updated user dot latitude. So we need to update the latitude property and value will come from here. But if you see, we also have longitude property. So we don't want to lose that value. So we need to spread out this user dot location dot coordinates first, and then add the latitude. Then the latitude will be updated and longitude will remain as. So let's try and see if it works. So let's say alias, I will change this to 45, click on save. And if I check the local storage, you can see it's correctly updated to 45. So when I click on edit, you can see it's 45. Even if I refresh, you can see it's 40. So we are successfully able to update this, but this is like extra code you need to add and the code is becoming lengthy. So there is a better way. So if you have a lot of properties that you want to update, instead of manually spreading out all the properties, we can use a library. So we can install the Immer.js library and then we can update this easily. So we don't need to spread out in all the properties. So if you search for npm Immer, you can see this is the library. It's very popular library. You can see weekly download. So it has a produce method which we can use. So let's first install this library. Let's start the application again. Now I need to import one function from schema. So what is the function name? The name is produce. You can see produce function takes a value and it returns a copy of that value, whatever we are passing. So now what we need to do here, instead of users.map, I can use produce method. And this produce, so let me first show you this. So this is users map method. I will cut it out. So here while setting the user, so this is the state. So you can directly pass properties that you want to set, or you can pass use updater syntax. So you get the previous state value and you can do some manipulation and return a new state by spreading out previous state and doing something with this. So there are two ways of setting state. With Immer, you can use this produce method. And here this function will automatically receive that updater value like users. So previous state. So it's known as draft. And here, whatever you want to do, you can do that. So I will comment out this. I don't want to do this. So this produce method will automatically receive the previous state value, which is the user array. So here it automatically uses that updater syntax. Now this draft is actually users. So it's common to call it draft because it's copy of that object. But you can call it users also if you want. Now this is exact same users array, but it's a copy of the array. So we can directly manipulate the property, even though it looks like you are manipulating or changing the property. Behind the scene, Immer.js manages that. So you are not actually changing the original object. So here, what we need to do, so we first need to find out the user with the matching ID. So I can say matching user equal to draft. Let's call this user original previous user. So it's not confusing what is draft. Previous user dot find. I can use find method, and for individual user, if user dot ID is equal to whatever ID that we are passing. We are passing ID. So I will find a user with matching ID. So I will get that user. Now I can directly update the property. I can say matching user dot name equal to updated user dot name. We can say matching user, let's say city. Matching user dot location dot city equal to updated user dot city. Now location dot state with update state and latitude. So it's inside coordinate. Location dot coordinates dot latitude equal to this. Now you can see I don't need this code. So you can see we have simplified a lot. So you can directly manipulate the properties of the actual object. So we get that object back that we are updating. So each user, so if you see here, application, each user is an object. So we are getting that object and that object is in matching user. So we are directly updating the property. So you need to make sure while setting you use the produce method. Produce will automatically receive the previous value of the state. So it uses the updater syntax. And you are directly updating. So it looks like you are updating directly, but it does not actually update. So Immer.js gives you copy of that object. So let me clear this and refresh this. Now you have this user array. Let's see if there is any error. No, you can update this. So let's say alias 1, 2, 3, and here I will update to 40. Now if I click on save, you can see this is correctly updated. And let's check the updated coordinates. You can see 48 is correctly updated. So we are not getting any error and it's also working. So you can see it in the local storage also. All the values are correctly updated. I can click on George 1, save this, and George 1 is okay. So even if I refresh, you have that updated. So this is Immer.js is a very popular library. Redux toolkit behind the scenes uses this. So inside reducer, you can directly manipulate the properties. So Immer.js comes inbuilt with Redux toolkit. But as we are not using Immer.js, we can use the produce function to update any of the properties. So this is how you can update any of the properties. So no matter how much nesting you have, you don't need to manually spread this property, other property. So this is a better way and it's efficient. So that's how you can update any of the manipulate array and object. It's very important how to update array and properties object. So you should know how to use this. So that's it for this. So I hope you are clear with how to update, do inline update operation as well as pre-populate those values and store that in the local storage. So you will not lose this value. So when you are storing in local storage, it will retain for all the tabs, you will have the entire access. Only for different browsers, you will not have those values. So those local storage data is retained across all the tabs for the browser. So even if I close the browser and open again, you still have that local storage data. So you will not lose it until you manually clear. So right now it's alive one. If I clear this, refresh this, you can see you say get that alive. Why this is coming? Because we are first reading from local storage. If it exists, then we assign that to user array. Otherwise, we are assigning initial user. So initial user has alive. So that's how you can update and you can complete this preview challenge. So you can see we have completed this. So that's it.